everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Cold Red. I'm Ray Carr, and with me always is Fitz. Fitz, how are you?
Good evening, Ray. How are you today?
Good. Jim, tonight we have a special guest. His name is Kenneth Strange. He's a former FBI special agent and was also a special agent in charge at the Department of Justice. Ken, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you today.
Thank you. Thank you both. Thank you all for having me. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Ken, we like to kind of start sometimes with sort of the Wayback Machine, we call it. Give us and our audience a little bit of a history. By the way, and we're going to talk a little bit about your book, A Cop's Son, One G-Man's Fight Against Jihad. So we'll come to that a little bit later. But we'd like to hear, and our audience likes to hear, how you started out in this business, where you were born, growing up, school, and then how did you become an FBI agent?
So that's a great question, and it really boils down to a matter of kind of navigating, one current to the next current, and or opening up doors opening up in my life, and actually going through them. So I'm from New York City, from a little place called Brooklyn, and I'm was pretty much living in a lower middle class to middle class environment. Lived in a row house. And down the street was a public school 222. So, I'm kind of, out of that environment. My dad was a NYPD cop. And so, I was the oldest of five children. Dad was doing his thing with the NYPD. And, my mother was just a homemaker, just kind of keeping everybody together. So, high school, and then in high school, my parents moved to Long Island, and so you started out there. Went through high school. That led to college up in Syracuse at a school called Lemoyne College. And mind you, all the while I'm in school, I'm just fascinated with languages. I was a Spanish major. And I'm also fascinated in writing books, writing articles, things of that nature. Every school I went to, I was in the school newspaper. So I come out of college with a degree in modern languages and Spanish in particular. And a few months later, I'm offered a job with the LaSalle Military Academy on Long Island. And so I'm teaching Spanish to American students, and the monks there, the brothers, this religious clergy, they said, look, we have foreigners here, lots of foreigners. They're from Central America, South America, Iran. We need someone to teach them English. So I began teaching not only Spanish, but English. And I did that for about 2 years. And then,
can you give us a time frame here? Because you mentioned
sure.
Iran.
Yeah.
We're talking the 60s, 70s.
Right. So I'm, starting out, I'm born in 1955. And, I'm graduating elementary school in 69, high school in 73, college in 1977. And in 1979, after teaching 2 years in this school, I actually get a job offer from the Middle East. It's with the Saudi Arabian royal family. So, it sounded fascinating to me. I'm still living at home with mom and dad in Long Island. And so I walked through that door, and, it was quite an experience. I spent 5 years of my life there. I met my wife there. And so that, I think, and that was kind of the start for me where I started to get into terrorism. There were a lot of things happening in the Middle East at the time. It was quite volatile. Shortly after I arrived, the American embassy in Tehran was overwhelmed by their people. So you had those hostages, and then a few weeks later, there's the siege of Mecca in Saudi Arabia, where the rebels take the holy mosque, and so all of this is happening, swirling around me. And in the meantime, I'm getting to know the Saudi Arabian royal family, getting a bird's eye view into their structure, the greater princes, the lesser princes, learning basic Arabic, and really immersed in the culture. So, I did that for 5 years. They were very, very interesting, exciting years. And then, kind of topped off at the end of my 5 years, I go to Egypt. I'm on my way home to the United States. My contracts are over. And I stop in Cairo, and I'm not the normal tourist. I'm not going out to the pyramids. I'm not going out for that felucca boat ride on the Nile River, that type of thing. No, instead, I'm out there at the grandstand outside Cairo. I want to see where Sadat was killed, Anwar Sadat, where he was murdered.
Just a few years before that, right?
Yeah, that's correct. That's right. So, that was in 81. And so the whole thing for me is very titillating. And I'm starting to have second thoughts about continuing a teaching career. And so there's this kind of in my ear, kind of, your father was in law enforcement. Maybe that sounds pretty interesting now, more interesting than it's ever been. I had thought I'd be, a professor at some point, in academia, but now I was kind of on this path towards law enforcement. So when I came back to the United States in 1985, I went to graduate school in Arizona, and it was there at this school called Thunderbird School of Global Management that I met a FBI recruiter. This was a school for basically, people that were interested in overseas business, international business, that had an interest in overseas work. So I was heavily recruited by the FBI and the CIA. So the FBI reached out to me and they said, look, you speak Spanish, you've been in the Middle East, you know Arabic, you know the culture. Think about the FBI. Would you be interested? And it was at that point I said, absolutely. I'm very interested.
Ken, before you go on there, I want to take a step back for just a second. It was a very volatile time when you were over there. There was a lot going on in a lot of these different countries. At any time, were you at risk because you are an American? You're over there. I mean, you don't look like a native Iranian, Saudi Arabian, Egyptian. You don't look like anything like that. Was there any concern on your behalf about harm coming to you?
In the 5 years I was there were just a handful of incidents where people took exception to me for who I was and what I represented. I remember people throwing rocks at me in the street at one point. Again, these were really dyed-in-the-wool jihadists. They were with the Muslim Brotherhood. And so I just happened to run into them. They didn't like me, obviously, and they started pelting me with stones. So I kind of got away. And I thought, I better keep my wits around me. I have to make sure I don't get stuck with these fundamentalists. And they
were very biblical anecdote there, getting stoned by an unruly mob.
There you go. But I think the most danger I faced I was with 2 Irishmen, myself, and a Filipino guy. And I know it sounds like a joke, like I'm gonna
don't blame the Irish now. Whatever you do, Jim and I are both Irish, so don't blame me.
Well, those Irishmen, they were over there with their on a contract with a milk company. I guess they had a joint venture with a Dublin dairy farm with the Saudis, trying to feed cows in the desert. Right? Pretty interesting proposition. But we went out to a small village on the outskirts of the empty quarter called Layla, and when we got there, I ran into some, again, fundamentalists came out to me just to see, who are you? They start asking you, you're the stranger. You're a threat to their way of life. And so the mistake I made, guys, was I was wearing a cross. And this was like, to Dracula, the cross to Dracula. And they flipped out and they started asking me, are you a Christian? And I said, yes, I'm a Christian. Yes, so what? And then holy hell broke loose. They started throwing rocks. The police came, mob. Now it was a mob. They're confronting us, not letting us go. And then the police came, this one fella, and he's shouting at us in Arabic, get out of here before they kill you. And so we just kind of took off running to the car where we had parked the car and just happy to get out of this town alive. But that was always in the background. Oh, because, you're in the most orthodox of Islamic countries. It's where Islam was born. And so, most of the people treated us very well. The younger Saudis, much more so. But some of the older ones, they were so brainwashed. And, your presence was an insult to them and their religion and their way of life.
And for some of our younger audience members, this was a volatile time worldwide with some of the Islamicists and plane hijackings, ship hijackings, the Achille Lauro. A few years later, the Marine barracks in Beirut was attacked. And so a lot of things going on during that time frame. And here you are, three Anglos at least with your two Irish friends and the Filipino, and you're just wrong place, wrong time. But luckily, Ken, you're here to talk about it a few decades later.
Well, thanks be to Allah for that, for putting me back here. But what's interesting is when I did go to Cairo, and this was ironic, it was the irony really of ironies, is, I'm trying to imagine Sadat, being gunned down by this Islamic Jihad, and these soldiers that are, part of the jihadists. And the person that had issued the fatwa, the edict to murder Sadat, was a guy, and you might remember him. He was Omar Abdulrahman, or the Blind Sheikh.
Yeah.
So, here I was in the grandstand, and knowing the history, not realizing that 6 years later, I'm going to be going toe-to-toe, jaw-to-jaw with this Muslim jihadist in his language on a street corner in Jersey City. I mean, who could have imagined that? So it was really, really bizarre how that whole thing kind of came to a head.
So going back to where you were talking about, you're out of this graduate school in Arizona, and you're recruited by the FBI, and you decide to take them up on their offer. Tell us what happened. So what year did you go into the academy?
Right. So I went in there in 1989. I was the class of 89-7. And I go
after
in.
Me, Ken. I was
89-2.
Right?
Oh, okay. Wow. Amazing. Oh.
You were probably there at the same time, maybe for a few weeks anyway.
No, we were there. 89-2 was there, 89-3, because we were out of there July 7th. Were you there by then?
We showed up in August.
Yeah. So I just
in August, and then we graduated in, November. Oh, that's fascinating, right? Yeah, very interesting.
I was a couple years before, but go ahead.
Okay. Great.
We have to respect our elders. You know what I mean?
Yes, we're.
Yeah.
Can I join your club? It sounds great.
So
you're
through the academy.
Yeah.
It's funny, just for our people that are listening, if you apply to the FBI, and you may have a lot of credentials under your belt, but if you lived in one or maybe two cities, but went somewhere for school, it's a streamlined background check they have to do on you. But Ken, I guarantee you, as much as they may have wanted you in, you added a few months to the background check, because not only where you lived, but where you visited,
yes.
And in the Middle East, again, these problematic areas. So they had to double check. You weren't one of them coming into the FBI. Anyway, of course, you passed the background and you got it.
Yes, Fitz. I mean, eventually, and you're right, it really slowed down the whole process. And in the meantime, I had been accepted and started working for manufacturers Hanover Trust in New York City. And, I was working as kind of a loan officer for the Middle East accounts. So I was working with the bank over on Park Avenue while I waited for the bureau to bring me on. I came in under the language program, under the Spanish language program. And I remember they called my house, and there was a Spanish speaker on the other end. And, they spent about half an hour with you, asking you questions, asking you to talk in Spanish. And there may have been a written test as well. But, I passed all of those exams and, finally got invited to the class of 89-7.
And your first office is?
Right. Yeah. So I wanted to go to New York because it had this great reputation, terrorism and counterintelligence and Russian spies. And, it was kind of like the flagship, at least in my mind. And so I didn't get that. I didn't get New York. I was disappointed. But I did get Newark, New Jersey. And it turned out to probably be the best thing that ever happened to me. because it was a much, much smaller office and I wasn't lost in the crowd. And someone, I don't know if it was the ASAC or the SAC or whatever, but someone said, Strange with his background should probably be on a JTTF. So
Joint Terrorism Task Force.
Right. A squad called C10. And so I show up. Now, my boss was not welcoming, to be honest with you. He was like, Strange, I don't know how you got on this squad. You shouldn't be here. If it were up to me, you wouldn't be here. You'd be doing applicant.
I had a sergeant like that. Don't you love when a supervisor does that to you as a new member of a squad or a unit? Anyway, been there, done that.
Okay, so you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, there was nothing he could do, so he had to be accepting of me. But it was, when I got there, it was a high-profile squad, high-octane. There was so many allegations and groups that they were investigating. I'm salivating because for me, it's like the candy store of terrorism. I can go Abu Nidal or IRA or Thieves or, you name it, or domestic, Black Liberation Army, whatever. So there was so many things happening on this squad. You really had to bring your A game to this group. And we had some state troopers as well. It was a diverse group, 2 state troopers, Secret Service agent, and then, men and women and Chinese fella from India. It was really diverse. Interesting.
See, there's a couple guys that, a guy by the name of Bill Waldy. You know Bill Waldy?
That name is familiar.
He was there. How about Jeff McClain?
I don't know that person.
I
don't know if you know any of the state troopers, but we had Bob Saplinski, who was on the squad. He's the person that actually arrested Yu Kikamura of the Japanese Red Army over on the New Jersey Turnpike with some bombs in his car. So Bob ended up, that kind of launched him onto our squad. And then, we had 2 others. Rick Fuentes was another fella.
Yeah, I know Rick.
Yeah, and Rick went on to become, I think, the commandant of the...
Here's the difference between Newark with you, Ken, and probably with Jim up in New York. I was in Buffalo to start, then came to Philly, 91. And on my squad was a bank robbery fugitive squad, but we also it was a terrorism squad as well. So we had like 30 guys on that squad, which included Jersey troopers, Philadelphia police officers, the whole cabal, Pennsylvania state troopers. And everybody was one squad. We didn't have a separate squad in the early 90s. That didn't probably come into after the first World Trade Center bombing. That's when they decided to make those squads and create those additional terrorism squads where they were kind of geared towards it. But prior to that first World Trade Center bombing, everybody was together. So, we're going on bank robberies and the terrorism guys are coming out with us on bank robberies,
Correct. You probably worked with a person named Sullivan up in Buffalo.
Yep. Pat Sullivan.
Yeah, so Pat sold us his house in North Plainfield.
Okay.
Yeah, so I remember meeting him eventually, but and then we had another guy from Buffalo who ended up coming down doing confidential informants, and I think his name was Harry Mount, and Harry had done motorcycle gangs.
Yep. He was on the OC squad. Yeah.
Organized. Any of the names we're dropping here, if you guys want to be a guest on Cold Red, let us know. You know how to contact us.
We can reach out to these guys.
So, Ken, Ray mentioned the first World Trade Center bombing. That, of course, was 1993.
Yes.
Jersey, Newark Division played a big role in that. Were you still on that squad then?
No, I was not. In fact, I was no longer with the Bureau. I had been recruited to another federal agency overseas. So I do remember, and there's in my book there's a few stories about some of the stuff involving me with the trade bombing as well. I just remember the craziest thing was I'm with my new agency. One morning I get up and I get the newspaper and I see this Mohammed Salame, one of the Sheikh's minions, and he's got the beard. maybe the world's stupidest terrorist trying to get a refund on the van that they blew up, right? But it said face of terror. And I said to my wife, I said, holy shit. I said, I know this guy. And my wife says, oh, you're exaggerating again. Typical. You're exaggerating. No, I swear to God. I said, I tried to flip this guy on a train in the World Trade Center itself, taking one of the PATH trains back to New Jersey over to the other side after a Christmas party at the FBI in New York. And I'm with a state trooper, and we see this guy, and I said, he's one of the I said to Kevin, the trooper, I said, he's one of the Sheikh's guys, for sure. And Kevin said, well, I don't know. And I said, for sure, I'm going to talk to him. I'm going to try to pitch him. And he goes, oh, okay, go ahead, good luck. So I sat down with him, and in Arabic, we went back and forth. I gave him my business card. I said, we could do great work together. And, he's kind of like, I don't know about that. So I said, look, here's my card. Give me a call. Or better yet, give me your phone number. And he says, oh, no, I can't do that. So anyway, he disappeared into the blackest of nights. That's the last time first and last time I saw him until I see him in the newspaper. Of course, I know what's coming because my business card, and my boss was Dan Sainer. Dan Sainer at the time, he was our squad supervisor. So he called me up and he said, Ken, what's going on here? We just did a search warrant in Salame's apartment, and your business card is here. And I said, well, it's a long story.
It was a long train ride.
It was.
Well,
just ironic that you'd meet this person right there in the world, right beneath the world.
Good for you taking the initiative. Sometimes there's a lot of other coordinated ways someone gets locked up or their kid gets locked up. That way you flip them, get them to work for you. You saw someone, you knew he was involved in that movement, and you took a chance. You sat down, and who knows how things could have gone.
Right. Well, that was really my forte. That's what I loved doing that. I loved going out and meeting people and talking to them and trying to pitch them and get them to work for us. That's what I did. That's what I did best. And with the Middle East, for me, it was much easier because I could speak their language. I knew their culture. They trusted me to some effect. Shiites and Sunnis, and where the other people on my squad, of course they don't have the background. They didn't do what I did, but I know the territory, and every day I was out there, doing that. And during the Gulf War, which was, we did some pretty good work, and
that was 91.
91, and and I talk about it in the chapter called "The Intersection of Fate and Destiny." Luck and destiny, I'm sorry. And I refer to what happened with our squad and how supposedly C-10 shortened the Gulf War by 6 months. It's just an amazing thing. Probably it's in the book, but just one of those things in life where you're at the right place at the right time. And, it worked out. But again, a team effort, a total team effort.
I would love to hear about this transition of yours, where you made the transition from the FBI. I mean, what an asset you were to the Bureau with your skill set. And then all of a sudden you decide to go to another agency. Was it a competing agency, or was it something different? How did it happen?
Yeah, so, great question. And these two ex-FBI guys, I don't know, through the grapevine, they heard about me, and they reached out and they said, hey, we heard about you, and, we're doing some work for an elite fraud unit overseas with the Agency for International Development. And, if you like to travel, which I did, this is the place for you. So, they kind of pitched me, and then I went down to Washington to speak to their supervisor, and they said, hey, you're a Spanish speaker. We could put you in Latin America within 1 to 2 years. And then, you work fraud cases all over the region and all over the world. And that's what essentially happened. I just love to travel. That was, in my blood. And so I went with this agency, and it was pretty interesting. I didn't know fraud. but they said, we'll teach you. And that's what they did. They taught me, and I was able to eventually hold my own with fraud investigations.
You know, it's
Didn't you have the opportunity to do the same thing in the Bureau?
Not so much. I mean, if you worked on white collar fraud, you were working savings and loans institutions, and maybe there was some public corruption cases that you could work, but nothing that would take you overseas. The LEGAT program was in its infancy, if that. I mean, there was talk about it taking off, and I thought about that. I said, maybe this would be a great way to get into the LEGATs, but then these two ex-FBI fellas said, "Oh boy, check this out. We're all over the world."
Yeah, I was going to say the turnover rate in the FBI is very low. You were basically home. You grew up in Brooklyn, and here you are in North Jersey. You said you were married and you had a wife and a house. The idea of adventure and travel spoke to you, and DOJ, of course, it's the federal government, so you weren't giving up your pension or anything like that. You just rolled that over into our mother agency, I guess, the Department of Justice. So that part wasn't an issue. So did you actually get sent to some other office in the U.S. or internationally once you left the Bureau?
Yeah. So my first posting was over in Roslyn, Virginia. We were over there in some of those offices. And then eventually, after 2 years, I was posted to San Jose, Costa Rica, which was pretty nuts. I mean, it was a beautiful place, real touristy place. And I did a year there, and then I was transferred to they closed down the mission because the Costa Ricans they graduated from American aid. And so they closed down the AID
Didn't know any
mission.
country ever graduated from us giving them aid. But I guess at least the Costa Ricans did.
Yeah,
Jeez.
unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm sure they're getting it back now. So
because it was really pura vida, as they say. It was a beautiful, beautiful place. And so they closed down the mission, and they packed us up. And I remember driving my family down the up the Pan American Highway to a country that was not so pura vida. It was a country that just came out of a war, and I'm talking about El Salvador.
yes.
So we were in the capital there. That was a tough assignment, and no sooner had we gotten there than the Marines over at the embassy said, "Be careful." We lost some of our guys over at Chili's in the Zona Rosa. They were assassinated over there, and so just be careful because there's still a lot of the guerrillas. The war was over, but there were a lot of guns out there, and there were some hard feelings.
That's tough to believe. So you're in San Salvador at this point, the capital, for a few years.
Yeah.
Working fraud cases, international.
Right. And in fact, I remember, I took one of my cases with me. It was an Egyptian case. So I was also traveling to Cairo back and forth. I would drag a prosecutor with me to Cairo. That was an interesting situation. And, the cases, there were all kinds of cases, from commodity import program cases to siphoning off vegetable oil on ships that were going out to India and places like that. So, some very interesting cases and all kinds, all kinds. I mean, conflict of interest stuff, even background, people's backgrounds. We had one fella in Costa Rica, and he was a foreign service type person, a foreign national, and he had padded his resume. He said he had either a master's MBA. I think he said he had an MBA, and it was accounting and accounting. He was in audit. And someone blew the whistle on him and said, "I don't think he has an elementary school education." So they gave me the case, and it turned out, he graduated from elementary school, but that was about it. Everything else was a fraud.
Interesting.
So, yeah, and we would do work with these people. They sat side by side with us, so very little uncomfortable.
And you got involved in some cartels while in Latin America, or investigating them?
Yeah, no, that would come later. So, I did, I think I did maybe 6 years with Agency for International Development. And I had a problem with the boss, and I was hoping to get some type of promotion. It never came to be. And, we had a case I was involved in out of Haiti. It was in Haiti, embezzlement case in Haiti. the U.S. Attorney's Office said, we're not going to, we're not going to prosecute this case. There's just not enough evidence. It's not a case we can win. And I agreed. I said, absolutely. The receipts, there are no receipts. The people are hiding all over the place in Haiti. And it's a very difficult case. And I told my boss that. She said, no, we can make this case. We're going to make this case. And if you can't make this case, you shouldn't. So immediately there was a lot of friction. And she goes, all right, we're going down to Miami. We're going to talk to the U.S. attorney down there. And so, okay, I set it up. And, the U.S. attorney was very pleasant to this lady. And he said, but no, we're not going to prosecute it. And she goes, but you have to. And then he goes, no. So I knew when that didn't work out, any capital I had accrued in that office had just dissolved. I just didn't see. She was new, and she was going to run the show, and I just didn't see my career going anyplace. It was at a standstill there. I got a call from SAC in Texas with the Department of Justice Office of Inspector General, and this fellow is a former Secret Service agent, and he said, "Hey, I'd love to have you join our group out here in El Paso. Understand you speak Spanish." So I flew out there. I had dinner with him and his family, and I liked what he was saying. And he said, "Look, I'm interested in getting you into the management program," and that was music to my ears. I'd been a special agent for so many years, and I opted to go with them, and it was an overall good decision.
Ken, are you able to talk about, you're with the Bureau, you kind of leave the Bureau, and you say you go to an agency. Now, I have a feeling and maybe our audience does too. Are you able to talk about what that agency, who that agency is? Or is
the agency that I went to? Yeah, so it's the U.S. Agency for International Development, AID, and they were founded in 1961 during the Kennedy administration, and this agency provides aid, and grants and you name it, monies and all kinds of programs to people all over the world, countries all over the world, from Egypt, India, a lot of the third world countries. So that was they were the recipients of our aid. We were, we had oversaw kind of any waste, fraud, and abuse on any of our programs, and also any of our personnel who went sideways. We also we'd have venue for those investigations. So we would work criminal cases, civil cases, and it was just interesting. You'd go from Miami, U.S. Attorney's Office in Miami, Greenville, South Carolina was another U.S. Attorney's Office that I became familiar with, plus Virginia. I think they were out of Alexandria or something like that. But yeah, I mean, there was a lot of work. And again, it was just a small elite unit, a lot of IRS CID people that had come over to work with us, some FBI. And, that's pretty much the composition.
So we're saying probably about 3 years with the Bureau. Is that about right?
That's right.
And then would you say another 3 or 4 years with AID?
It's about six years.
6. Okay. And then over to
OIG. So that was the final, my final stop. I was with them until 2010. So I came out with about 21 years, something like that.
And that's Office of Inspector General. Just
yes.
All the acronyms we throw around here.
Yeah. Again, another one of the OIGs, the Office of Inspector General.
Ken, you were aware that at some point in your career, you had a friend, a colleague, who was actually killed by Al Qaeda, I believe in Jordan, in the Middle East. Could you share some of that with us?
Yeah, his name was Larry Foley, and Larry worked for AID in Peru. And he was, I was working several cases in Peru, so he was helpful, very helpful to me. We had dinner. I remember he said, let's do dinner over in Lima, one of the suburbs, went out with his family. And so he was a contact that I had from my investigations in Peru. He ended up going, I think, transferring to Jordan, Amman, Jordan, and then he was assassinated by, I think it was the Zarqawi, that fellow who was with ISIS in Iraq, and I think he was responsible for the hit on Larry Foley. So it's terrible.
Was an arrest ever made, or did our military take care of his group? How did that work out?
Well, they killed Zarqawi. They eventually,
That's right.
I think they dropped I think they dropped a bomb on him and just pulled. I think he survived the bomb for a few minutes, from what I recall. But yeah, he was bad news. He was beheading. You remember he was beheading some
That's
of
right. Yes.
our people over there on film.
Did this was Larry, his name, right?
Lawrence Fuller.
Did his death sort of change the trajectory of your career, make you think about some things or move in a different direction?
Not really. I mean, I know I'm fully aware of, the dangers over there. I mean, right from Saudi Arabia, I could see, you're as an American, you're a target, and, it just comes with the territory. You want to travel, you want to see the world, you want to meet people. It could come with a price as well. So I knew that was just part of it. I mean, I guess it would have made me a little more aware of my surroundings, for sure.
Let me ask you this. When you left USAID and you go over to DOJ, which is OIG, which is the Office of the Inspector General. I know we're throwing all these acronyms out there, but the Office of the Inspector, what were your responsibilities, investigative responsibilities with OIG?
Right. So again, as part of the Inspector General's office, responsibilities include your investigation of any waste, fraud, and abuse with DOJ programs and DOJ personnel. I was attached, I was in El Paso. So, and again, this was at the height of the Vicente Carrillo Fuentes cartel, and right over across the river from us in Juarez. So, we ended up basically investigating a lot of people that were kind of compromised or bribed by cartel people, and there were plenty. And and in fact, we had the purview of Border Patrol, INS, Bureau of Prisons. So there was a lot of variety of work. And at one point, I mentioned it in the book, it was like with the Border Patrol, because they had this incredible need for personnel, and they had kind of rushed a lot of people through the process. So now they're on the border. I thought they were ill-equipped to handle some of these overtures by the cartel. And so we had a lot of, especially the younger ones, they were either compromised by sex or by money or by, just stupid things like these Border Patrol agents that go across and they get drunk out of their mind. And then they grab these hookers and try to get them back across the land bridge. And everybody's arrested. Just like stupid stuff like that. But there was so much work. I just remember at one point I would interview these people. Like there was one fella, and I said, look, I've heard, where there's smoke, there's fire. And, there's a lot of smoke here with you, young man. And he's nodding his head. And he goes, yeah, I know. And I said, so, I know how you can get caught up in these things. Yeah, Mr. Strange, that's right. Yeah, that's pretty much how things go. Yeah, I know. And I said, he goes, what are my options? And I said, well, I could do a long drawn out case in the U.S. Attorney's office with you, or I don't know, or you make a decision. And he said, I think I'm going to resign. And so there was a lot of that, I had no evidence against the guy. I could have made a huge case, would have taken a long time, a lot of resources. Some of them were it was so obvious, and they just chose to, after I talked to them, they quit.
Let me just see if I can kind of reduce this to something that our audience might understand. When you look at what you did, would you consider it to be something similar to an internal affairs within a police department that looks at all the abuse and the waste within a police department and corruption by those officers? Is that
Ray? That's exactly what it is. That's the perfect simile to that. It is an internal affairs type function. Well, no doubt about it.
So here's my next question. Was there ever an occasion where you were involved in an investigation related to the Bureau?
Yes. In fact, after 9/11, we lost immigration and naturalization, INS, but I think we got DEA and the FBI. And so FBI was new for us. There was a lot of friction, our role and OPR of the, Office of Professional Responsibility. But yeah, there were a few cases I recall. And here was the interesting thing, which I always found really fascinating. Because we were so small, sometimes we would make cases in which we would need help. And so who would you turn to for help but the FBI, right? Well, the FBI had the bodies and stuff, so they would help you, and they would, for example, BOP cases, make some good contraband cases. So you're working with the FBI, and yet at the same time, you're investigating FBI members of the FBI. So it was this, kind of almost like a conflict of interest sometimes.
And here you're an outsider to the FBI. However, you went through the academy and spent 3 years as a special agent. So you also have that connection to everything you're doing there. So
yeah, that gave me a little bit of an advantage because a lot of the my colleagues at OIG, they were, from the Secret Service or from Air Force OSI. But I had been in the Bureau. I knew some of the people. I knew how the Bureau worked. But I had a few cases. We had San Antonio had a case there, just a stupid case, really stupid case. Kind of, again, an internal type thing within the Bureau, not criminal, but just a lack of candor, which, as you know, and again, knowing the system, I would make it a point if I was talking to someone and say, I'm going to ask you again, please, just remember the truth. It'll set you free. But if you prevaricate and you get caught, you're done. So I'd always give that second chance, almost like I'd want to shake some of these people. Come on. It's okay, but just don't lie. That's the worst thing you could do.
It's, again, for audience, when you talk about lack of candor, when an agent gets caught up in lies, it destroys his career because he can never testify in open court again. It just kind of just makes him useless as an agent. And so they're tied to a desk, or they wind up being terminated, which it's really hard to get fired from the FBI unless you're committing a crime, which that's happened too, but you never hear about those things. Did you ever, what's the most egregious incident that you can recall? Doesn't matter if it was with the Bureau or any other agency.
It's egregious. There was an upper-ranking official in El Paso. I don't want to mention names, but this was a high-ranking official. And again, we're on the border. Again, corruption is always close by. And, he got in touch with someone that on the other side of the river, and, they formed a friendship, and I think he was being played. And then that person said, hey, maybe your wife is looking for a job, and I have a job for your wife. And so, oh, okay, yeah. And so she gets a job, but it's really not much of a job, if you kind of follow what I'm saying. And, then someone blew the whistle on him, and, the wife's receiving money for work that's not happening. And he's the conduit to the Mexican fellow who was, alleged member of a cartel. And so he's interviewed. And again, the candor thing came up, and, I guess the immediate instinct is to deny. And that got him in a world of trouble. So, eventually, I know he lost his job, and I think there may have been some consequences in the justice system. I just don't recall the whole thing because I worked pieces of it. But it was really sad because it could have been avoided in several ways.
Yeah, it's always sad when those things happen.
Well, just like you tried to recruit the jihadists on the train way back in your early career, someone may have sat down with this boss in this El Paso office at a bar, restaurant. Hey, I heard you're this and your wife's looking for a job. Next thing you know, he fell for it. He kept that business card. He made a phone call or email, whatever it was. And I'm sure you had those records available too. So that's how this recruiting works. You used that word a few times. The Bureau recruited you. Then I guess USAID recruited you. You tried to recruit the guy on the train. His business card was found when he was arrested, or your business card was found. So it's interesting how that works. And even the good guys can get recruited, to do bad things.
Sure,
And that's what happened in this case you just described. And fortunately, we have, agencies and divisions and departments like yours that keep the people on the up and up and honest and all that stuff. So yeah, it makes for an interesting career. So when did you finally hang up the gloves, retire? What have you been doing since then?
Right. So I got out of El Paso. They offered me the SAC position in Los Angeles, which is what I took. So I finally had
special agent in charge. You're running the office.
I'm running the office, and I had to clean house a little bit because was just not happy with some of the people there. But once I was able to hire my own people, which was just great, then it became a well-oiled machine. And I was excited, once all these people that I had found that I knew had potential, once I got them into my office, and the other folks, I kind of put the heat on them, or they just said, I don't want to put up with this bullshit with this new guy. I think I'm going to retire. So there was a little bit of that going on as well. But I finally had my own office, and it was very nice. It went pretty well.
Here's what we'll say: you unrecruited those people.
Yes, I guess you could put it that way.
It's not really a word if you're out there listening, but I use it for these purposes. So you finally want to retire?
Yeah. So 2010.
All right.
I went in 2010, and I actually had a job offer with Siemens, the German company. They wanted me to start up a compliance investigative office in Mexico City. Again, loving travel, I said I'm there. So, I got to Mexico City and spent a few years there, and it was super, very, very interesting experience.
And at some point, I suppose in retirement, you wrote your book, A Cop's Son, One G-Man's Fight Against Jihad.
Right. Yeah. So now that this thing called life had pretty much wound down, and my kids were off and running, I had a little more time to devote to writing. So in 2019, I self-published a book. This one was a religious travel, adventure, spirituality book. It's Your Camino, one couple's 500-mile pilgrimage across Spain. So that was my first book. It received some awards, which surprised me. I'd never won anything. And Martin Sheen was very helpful, the actor out here in Malibu. So he was very helpful. He had done his own movie about the Camino called The Way with his son, Emilio Estevez. So he helped me with the book. I turned that out. And then right after that, I came out with Cop's Son in last year, as a matter of fact. So I was excited about that because I wanted to get my father's story as a NYPD cop in there with my own travel stories and investigative stories. And it worked out very nicely. And it's got an award as well. So I got a very nice endorsement from Ray Kelly, NYPD, and Bill Bratton, NYPD and LAPD. And they were so helpful. Said, look, here's what I'm trying to do. And my dad was, and once I mentioned my dad, NYPD, and that whole connection, it was like, yes, send it, and send it and we'll see what happens. So I understood what they were saying. Maybe if it sucks, I'm not going to hear back from them, but they were very kind, and they endorsed it, both endorsed it. And also the Assistant Inspector General of the CIA, I read it, and he said, man, anybody going into law enforcement should read this. Because, it's not just pounding on your chest, I did this, I did that, but it's also the failures, the tragedy, like with the Russian informant, the successes, tragedy, the boredom, everything in between.
And two of our former Cold Red guests, Ed Morales and Bobby Chacon, both gave positive reviews to this book. So
great.
The other names you can just, put aside when I just actually endorse it. It's a good book.
Absolutely.
Oh, I tell you, Morales, again, he was part of my training.
Mine too.
And I said, boy, he's got to be in this book. Jodie Foster was part of our training too, so she's in the book.
Silence of the Lambs was filmed when you were there.
Our class. She's in our class. She's doing the Yellow Brick Run with us. I'm sitting next to her on the bus, but it's in the book in our conversation, my conversation with Jody Foster. But yeah, Ed Morales, a terrific guy. Funny also, I'm at a conference in D.C. in Quantico, and there's a guy named Frank Lorenzetti he's out of the Houston. He was out of the Houston office. He's a supervisor, and so he's in the terrorism field too. So I'm like, oh my God! I go up to him. I said, Mr. Lorenzetti, it's me, your student, Ken Strange, physical sciences, remember? And he goes, yes, I remember you. I gave you a 95 because you weren't listening to me about putting footnotes in there. So I took 5 points off. I'm like, Jesus, he remembers it? But it was funny running into him. But also Bobby Chacon I would see in Los Angeles from time to time. And Dick Marquise was another fellow working on the Lockerbie bombing. So I had also met him in the FBI, and I wanted him to be in the book too.
How can someone get your books, plural, if they want a website, put anything out there that can help out?
Yeah. So website is www.kennethstrange.com. That's one way. And, otherwise you go to Amazon. You can go to Amazon for both of the books. And you go to Barnes & Noble for the Cop's Son. And I have another book coming out in 2025 called Land of Sand. And that's a kind of coming-of-age love story set in the Middle East, in Saudi Arabia. So I'm hoping that'll come out in 2025. That's the whole Saudi Arabia experience.
Interesting. Wow, we've learned a lot from you, Ken. You've lived quite the life of open doors and sliding doors and all those things. And you went in many of them, and here you are now, a kid from Brooklyn, living in beautiful, well, we'll just say you're living in Southern California.
With the sun in my eyes.
There you go. Well, it's a nice, almost biblical effect on you. We'll bring it back that way.
It's been a pleasure to share this with you, believe me.
Yes.
Ray, any final words before I take us out?
Ken, I really enjoyed our conversation. I can't believe we were so close together. Was Larry Bonney your class counselor? Larry Bonney?
No. Geez. I know there was a Brian.
Yeah, not the two field agents, but who was the overall counselor?
Okay. Did you say Larry Bonney?
Yeah, Larry Bonney.
Yeah. No, I remember Larry Bonney, but I don't think he was actually part of our group. But yes, I remember him. The other one was Bob Rogers. Was the
Bob Rogers? Yeah.
The road to hell, with the yellow brick road.
Remember Jeff Nakamura?
Yes.
Nakamura.
Yeah, because they're wonderful. They're wonderful people.
These names, Bob Rogers. I'll never forget when the Cold War was still. We're going to end with this story. When the Cold War was still going on, Soviet Union, U.S. I'm in class 1988, and he sits the whole class down. He got to know us now. We're like in our 10th, 12th week, and he just tells the whole class, about 40 of us. Yeah, I just want you to know, and he was a big runner, by the way, former Marine, big run.
Yeah.
And he said, we're all sitting down after a big run. He said, just so you know, if we ever find out that the Soviets launched the ICBMs, the nuclear missiles are coming to us, the East Coast, Washington, Richmond, we're all going to be gone. He said, you know what I would do? And we all kind of look at each other. No. And he goes, I'd get my wife and my kids, and we'd go for a run. And he didn't crack a smile. He was dead serious. No. And that's the kind of guy he was. And he taught us so well, defensive tactics, keep in shape. He eat well. Unfortunately, he died of cancer maybe 15 years ago.
Right.
But that'll get anyone in that regard.
Yeah. Here's Bob Rogers.
He is definitely in the book.
We're sitting there and we're in class, and he's starting some defensive tactics. And he goes, he points to me. He says, come up here. He says, give me a push. So I gave him a little push, and he goes, come on, give me a push. That's no push. Give me a push. So I said, are you sure? And he goes, yeah, give me a push. Well, I did. I lifted him right off the ground and right on his ass.
Oh my God.
Yeah, he went right down, and everybody was like amazed. He goes, he got up, he says, that's the best push I ever had.
That's wild.
It's amazing, just amazing.
Yeah, good. He was a good guy.
I'm going to sign us out, but before we go out, I want to give a little word to a friend of mine from Bensalem PD, Terry Lockman, who just died last week. We were rookies together. I went to the FBI. He went to Bucks County Detectives, and I met him in Florida a few times since then. He was going to be a guest on Cold Red, but it didn't quite work out. The big C got to him. So, Terry, you were a great police officer, detective, and friend, and kudos to you and your wife, Janice, and rest in peace, pal. And so with that in mind, everyone, thanks for listening. Thanks for checking us out on Cold Red. Please go to our website, coldredpodcast.com. Like us, subscribe, thumbs up, all those type things. And I want to thank Matt McDonald, Matt Robinson, our producers, Rick Schilling, our music producer. And remember, we'll see you next week. Another episode of Cold Red. And until then, stay safe. Be aware of your surroundings, because it might just save your life. Thanks, Ken. Thanks, Ray. See you guys next time.
Thank you.